Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a massive structural shift happening right under the radar in global private markets. We're looking at how a huge wave of European private wealth pouring into the African continent is absolutely forcing a revolutionary level of accountability in private equity. We're talking about a whole new system where sustainable investing is no longer just a slick marketing brochure, it's a legally binding financial imperative. So think about this for a second. What if a Wall Street bonus depended entirely on reducing carbon emissions? Imagine you're a high-powered fund manager. Your multi-million-dollar performance bonus, your profit participation, is literally being held hostage. If you fail to hit very specific, independently verified environmental or socioeconomic targets, you automatically forfeit your own payout. No way around it. And this isn't some hypothetical, far-off future scenario. It's exactly what's happening right now as European capital totally reshapes how investment works in Africa. Okay, let's dive into the mechanics of this. For years, the investment world has talked a really big game about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. But historically, a lot of that was pretty passive, just a do-no-harm checklist to keep folks happy. But what we're seeing now, largely driven by these highly sophisticated European family offices, is a mandatory transition toward proactive, strictly measurable impact generation. It's a complete evolution of how capital is not just deployed, but actively measured.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. First, we'll look at patient capital in Africa. Then, we'll decode SFDR and those Article 8 and 9 classifications. Third, the ESG-linked carry revolution. Fourth, we'll look at some real-world proof. And finally, how they're actually verifying the impact.
Starting with Section 1, patient capital enters Africa, bypassing traditional constraints. So the whole landscape of alternative asset management is shifting dramatically as European wealth moves into Africa. Historically, African private equity was dominated by rigid, 10-year institutional funds that essentially forced the sale of companies just to manufacture liquidity. Those institutions, like your big government-backed development finance orgs, put immense artificial pressure on fund managers to exit, totally regardless of market conditions. Contrast that with the European patient capital coming in now from single and multifamily offices. They bring these highly flexible, multi-generational wealth management strategies. It's all about prioritizing sustainable, long-term growth over forced short-term exits. It's a real game changer. Moving to Section 2, decoding SFDR, the strict EU mechanics. Now you've got to know, this patient capital doesn't come without strings attached. Far from it. To access these funds, African fund managers have to navigate the SFDR, which stands for the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. It's an EU rule that imposes exceptionally strict transparency and reporting requirements on anyone, anywhere, trying to market funds to European investors. So, to attract this wealth, African general partners are having to rapidly adopt these standards. The SFDR categorizes funds strictly based on their sustainability profiles, and there are two main categories completely dominating the conversation right now. What's absolutely fascinating here is the stark contrast between these two classifications. You've got Article 8 funds, which must actively promote environmental and social characteristics alongside their broader financial goals. That alone is a pretty high bar. But then you have Article 9 funds, and these represent the absolute pinnacle of the framework. For an Article 9 fund, a specific, measurable, sustainable investment objective isn't just some nice-to-have side project. It is their absolute core mandate. It's the whole reason they exist. Let's hit Section 3, the ESG-linked carry revolution, tying bonuses to impact. So how do you actually guarantee a fund manager adheres to an Article 8 or 9 mandate? Simple. You hit them right in their wallet. Traditionally, a general partner's carried interest, which is their incredibly lucrative share of the fund's profits, is based solely on exceeding a financial benchmark. Hit the number, get the bonus. But under an ESG-linked carried interest mechanism, a significant percentage of that profit share is legally contingent upon achieving predefined, independently verifiable sustainability KPIs. If the management team fails to hit their impact targets, say cutting carbon intensity or improving gender equality in their portfolio, they automatically forfeit a predetermined percentage of their money. Gone. And this brilliantly illustrates the actual math behind the mechanism. This basic waterfall structure shows exactly how profits are paid out. After returning the initial money and the basic baseline profits to investors, look closely at that final stage. The fund manager's bonus, their carried interest, is literally multiplied by an ESG score. So the commercial return and the sustainable impact are now mathematically inseparable. You can't get one without the other. Now, you might be wondering, what happens to that money if the manager misses their targets? Crucially, to ensure a manager isn't perversely rewarded by just, keeping the funds floating in the vehicle, any forfeited capital is structurally redirected. Depending on the exact fund, that penalized capital might go straight toward purchasing certified carbon credits or funding aligned NGOs, or it just gets distributed right back to the limited partners. The bottom line, the manager permanently loses it.
Section 4, Real-World Proof, the funds in action.
Let's look at what this actually means on the ground, using two massive recent fund closes. So AfricInvest FFA3 is an Article 8 fund. They're explicitly targeting corporate governance transparency and localized job creation across small and medium enterprises. Meanwhile, Amethis Fund 3 went all in and achieved the highly coveted Article 9 classification. They were actually the first fund to successfully pursue this incredibly strict approach on the African continent. Their KPIs are completely locked into employment quality, gender equality, and extremely rigorous environmental performance metrics. So, the crucial point here is the sheer scale of this movement. Amethis Fund 3 didn't just casually test the waters. They announced a massive final close of 406 million euros. Think about that. That's almost $500 million of institutional and private European capital deployed into Africa, strictly bound by Article 9 mandates and heavily tied to ESG-linked carried interest. And let's be clear, they aren't doing this for charity. They're doing this because they view strict environmental and socioeconomic uplift as an absolute precondition for risk-adjusted outperformance. Which brings us to Section 5, Verifying Impact, Fighting Greenwashing. Because let's face it, tying a manager's bonus to carbon and jobs sounds fantastic in a European boardroom, but how do we know they aren't just faking the data in highly fragmented emerging markets? Well, the answer is rigorous, tech-enabled data verification. When actual money is on the line, the data has to be absolutely bulletproof. We're actually seeing a 60% surge in the integration of artificial intelligence into impact measurement tools just to ensure data accuracy. On top of that, these KPIs are overseen by independent boards filled with expert validators. They rely on strict baseline creation when an asset is acquired, and they compare it directly against the data at exit. It's a completely airtight audit trail. And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this explainer. We are witnessing a profound, irreversible evolution in global capital formation. If European family wealth is successfully forcing private equity managers to legally tie their personal bonuses to verifiable AI-audited impact over in Africa, how long until they demand Wall Street adopt these exact same rules back home? It's a massive shift and definitely one to keep a close eye on. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time.